Hello and welcome to our 8th and final trustee training. Today we get to talk about advocacy for your library. I will drop the link here in the chat of our LibGuide where you can find all of the resources I mentioned today, among many others. If you would like to find it in an easier fashion, you can go to our website, library.nd.gov, click on Services for Libraries and Education, click under the cloud where it says LibGuides, then scroll on down to Public Library Board of Trustees. And that will take you to the same link that I just put in chat. My name is Abby Ebach. I've been a public library specialist at the State Library for the past 3 years, and most notably, I am not a lawyer. This is my disclaimer that anything I say is not considered legal advice. Please discuss all legal questions with your local attorney. Diving right into advocacy. So, as a board member, I think it's really important for you to know that the library, like the people in charge of promoting the library, is not just the library staff. It's not just the library director that's sharing about it on social media platforms or putting it in the newsletter. You as individual board members have a responsibility to the library to share all of the great things, especially from your really unique perspective, right? There's only 5 or maybe a few more of you, depending on your situation, that have this really unique like guiding opportunity. And so your perspective is really unique. This is going to mean sharing the library's posts on social media so that your own followers, your friends, your family in town and even out of town can see what your library is doing, and you're going to help spread that reach and reach outwards, right? It also might mean talking about the library to other groups that you're a member of. So if you're a member of the local Lions Club or a church group or a volunteer firefighter, again, that's a unique position to talk about the library and its services to a group of people that may not regularly use the library, or they may not know about all of the services that it offers. You can pass along that information about meeting spaces, resource collections, programs, upcoming campaigns that might be of interest to these groups or complement what they're doing. You can help these people either choose to like support the library personally or as a like completely new partnership between the library and this group that you're a part of. So you can connect, personally or the group itself. You can advocate for the library to your friends and family, which I really encourage you to do, but you can also advocate in other areas of your life. So your hairdresser or your bank teller or your pharmacist. My hairdresser was very confused about the concept of the library and thought that she had to pay for a library card. Great educational moment for me. And it's looking for these opportunities and taking them as a time to share how the library can benefit a person on their personal or professional life. We all know that the library can benefit us in a lot of different areas, but not everybody does. That's just kind of the nature of things. And then as a board member, you know better than pretty much anybody what's going on in your library and your community. And so again, you can always be on the lookout for those opportunities. It might be when an organization you're working with needs a resource that the library provides, or again, picking up a prescription at your pharmacy, these daily interactions. It's important to be advocating for the library because you don't know when you are going to necessarily need this community goodwill. Advocacy can seem more authentic when you're always sharing like great library stories and experiences rather than like, oh, well, we need money, so now here's a good story about the library. But if you're doing this in an ongoing fashion, it's more authentic when you slip in and the city wants to cut our funding. So if you could please help out with that. When the libraries put a lot of time into a big program, right? Like one of these once a year things, like an annual large scale activity, board members should be a big part of the effort to help advertise this. share broadly across your community to participate with the library, especially in these like big events all of the time, but big events especially, a lot of times communities really rally around because they're annual. Like every year I go to the Bismarck Library's Art of Books, and I see people there that I don't necessarily see at other programs because they really rally around this one activity. It's a great way to get the community to reconnect to the library as a resource hub. And then it can help, and ways that they can assist with the library. Those are the like fun advocacy things, in my opinion. But one of the largest areas of advocacy is going to focus on funding the library directly. So this might be, like I said, the city's or county mill levy. It might be participating in a fundraiser for the summer reading program. If you've been advocating all year round, it's likely that people already know like the library is really important and they're going to want to help. They'll want to attend this fundraiser, or they're going to want to try and help support the library's budget with their testimony or a vote or something like that. But if you're only talking about how great the library is when you need something from the community, your response is likely going to be smaller. It's not any less valuable by any means, right? Like you still want this positive response. It's just likely going to be smaller because you haven't spread it as far and wide as you can throughout the entire year, or just in an ongoing fashion. Advocating for funding is not just about telling people about library services. It's not just that list of things. It's the why. It's why these services are valuable. So this can be using anecdotes from community members. It can be using statistics. So like circulation, attendance, services used. When talking about money, it can be really helpful, depending on who you're talking to talk about a return on investment or ROI of different services. So like look at the cost to be a member of the Library to Go Overdrive ebook consortium, and then look at the usage from your patrons. It might come down to 20 cents per patron, 2 cents per books checked out. And when you look at that, it seems like a really small amount, and therefore it's a really high return on investment for the library. And this just shows that the library is being a good steward of taxpayer dollars. If you're advocating for an increase in the budget, and not merely like just maintenance of the same amount, you're really going to want to focus on what services you can provide with X number of more dollars to show that the entire community both wants this and that they'll will use it. So this is where like community feedback, surveys, anything that you really might do during like a strategic planning process is going to come in really handy. You can also get testimony from members of the community to really advocate on your behalf as well and to make your case stronger. This comes back to establish these relationships year round so that they're easier to gather these stories, that you're having this ongoing conversation about how wonderful the library is and the services that they provide, so that you're able to kind of pass them around. And then when you are calling for more people to share, they're already a part of the conversation. They're ready, they've been primed, they're eager to participate as well. I know that 100% of the people I've ever talked to hate the term elevator pitch. I also hate it. But I also want to encourage you to come up with one that you're able to customize based on the situation. It doesn't have to be like a super formal thing. But some good starting points are going to be, can you name 3 to 5 issues facing your community? Not the library, your community. This can give you that starting point because the library should be aiming to help fill those gaps, to help fill those issues and serve the community. It's important that the goal isn't necessarily to advocate for the library, but to advocate for the people and how the library can serve them. So the action or purpose of the library and how you fit into it is important to include. An example might be like, the library is currently trying to expand their hours. Nice and basic. Next up, you're going to want to add the why. or like the real reason people care about this. So the benefit to the library expanding the hours might be, we want to do this because many people don't have access to the internet at home. So they're using the library's computers to fill out forms, shop online, and stay connected with their families. Next, you're going to want to address what the library is currently doing that isn't meeting that need, or why that need is important. Again, this can be broad, it can be specific, but it's also the point where you're probably going to have to do some research. So this would say like 30% of the community doesn't have access to the internet at home, and the library's hours don't currently accommodate working families. You can follow this up with real examples. Statistics are really, really powerful. I love statistics, but the words and stories of actual library users and community members are way, way more powerful. So if you have a story of Leanne and how she has to print out forms for her home daycare, but she doesn't have a printer and she can't get to the library until after the daycare closes at 5. Perfect. You've now put a face to these numbers, to this problem. The last part of a good like elevator speech is telling people what action you want from the person you're talking to. So do you want them to write their support to the board so that you guys have a collection of them? Do you want them to have their support to the county commission? Do you want them to vote a certain way? Do you have a bond issue coming up? Do you have a special election? Is there a certain vote that matters? Maybe you want them to sign up for a program that's brand new or participate in a book club. It doesn't really matter the area of the library that you're trying to advocate. You can have a set elevator pitch for it. If you want to have a general one, that's when you're going to want to kind of have some library statistics floating around in your head. So 1 in 3 North Dakotans has a library card. There are more visits to North Dakota libraries than attendance at all Vikings games and all NDSU football games, like significantly more. Those are kind of the two that I fall back on at the state level. But if you just want to be having like these candid conversations with your hairdresser, I always come back to the hairdresser. You might just be saying like, oh, yeah, last night I was at a board meeting for the library. Here's some of the things we're still doing during the pandemic. So online story times, we're still checking out books, doing curbside service. A lot of people really liked it because they didn't have to come inside, and just having this conversation about the library services and how they've been growing or changing. And then if there is something that you want from this person, or just to educate them further about the library, you might be saying, well, you know, it's a tough budget season and they want to cut our funding by 5% this year. So we might have to cut back on our hours or lay somebody off. Somebody's knee-jerk reaction to that is probably just going to be like a generic, like, oh no, that's not good. But if you can take it a step further and say like, here's what you can do to help. Here's how you can support us, the library board, the library itself, to our city council or commission, to encourage them to keep the library's funding level. Otherwise, we are going to have to cut back on services or hours. It can be that simple. If you're like me at all, you can find it really, like I find advocacy difficult in that aspect. I'll tell you to do it all day long, but I know that it can be uncomfortable and seem really inauthentic. One way that everybody says to do it online when I was researching like best ways to advocate and getting better at advocacy, and they say to practice at your board meetings, which again, your board meetings are full, you are busy people. I don't want you to spend 45 minutes practicing your how to advocate speeches, but you can include it as a part of your monthly board meetings. So you can take turns, have one board member a month or at every meeting, just have one person share an advocacy story or opportunity that they had. You can invite different library staff members to a board meeting, one, because it's great for them to see that the board is approachable and what the board can do. But also they can share a story that they actually had in the library with the board. And all of a sudden, the entire board has this story that they can then share out that's really meaningful. This kind of has a built-in advocacy component for the board meetings so that you're all educated on an ongoing basis. And it also just makes sure that you're keeping it at the forefront of your mind, that the library's message stays on target and is on brand, so that you're all kind of sharing the same mission and vision of the library. I know I've sprinkled in for the past few weeks some of my favorite library statistics, but I think they're worth repeating, mostly because it's really helpful to have statistics available in your mind whenever you have the opportunity to talk about them. So here you go. In 2018, North Dakota had the second highest number of outreach vehicles per capita in the United States. We have one outreach vehicle for every almost 63,000 people. In 2019, over 2 million people visited libraries in North Dakota. So that's state level data, but you can and should go local. So you can talk about the number of people that your library has served directly, or how many items were checked out in the past year. My favorite library factoid isn't actually a statistic at all. It's that North Dakota was the first and currently is still the only known state to receive federal funding from the Department of Defense to provide library service during the construction of the Tacoma Pyramid. If you ever want to talk about that, call me. I could talk about it all day. It's fascinating. But it's just a really good example of like a small fact that will let people talk about the importance of library services to you. So if your library has like an interesting historical tidbit or story attached to it, if it has some feature that you've always wondered about, there are libraries across the state with dinosaur fossils, Indian village remnants. Hazen has an entire card catalog of obituaries, which I find really interesting. These are things that you can talk about when you're advocating for the library to spark somebody's interest, to spark a conversation about everything that the library has. You're going to need to remember that not every library has the same interests as you. So like, you probably all aren't as fascinated with the Tacoma Pyramid as I am, but I'm not super invested in dinosaur fossils, but maybe you are. So sharing these makes sure that you're grabbing the interests of different people at different times, since we're all a little varied in what will capture our attention. Variety is great. So the general do's and don'ts for library advocacy, or just any advocacy in general, I guess. I've covered a lot of it, but it bears repeating. The number one thing is going to be to reach out. So call your representatives, congratulate them on their election if they're new, welcome them back to their role if they're not new. You can encourage them to get a library card. As State Librarian Mary Susie often says, if you haven't been in a library in the past 5 years, you haven't really been in a library. I'd argue it's more like 2 years, but whatever. Libraries are constantly evolving. So you can invite legislators or local representatives at the city and county level to your library for a tour. They can attend special programs at your library, or just make sure that they know your face and name. Introduce yourself, share more information about the library. You can send their offices copies of the library's newsletter. Times the library has been highlighted in the press or the newspaper. If you really want to get like fancy about it, you can tag them in social media. Just don't be like really overbearing about it. But one of my favorite things on this list is just to go to them, attend their events, and discuss your role as a library board member and why they should care about the library. Establish this line of communication. Another area to reach out, just reach out to other groups that are part of and serving your community. You can target your message to these groups, so make the stories personal and make sure it's really focused on this other group's mission and vision. How do you guys complement each other? You just kind of have to boil it down to like what's important, why it's important, and then what you want from them. What is the need? You're going to want to stay positive. So you don't want to naysay or be negative about someone if they disagree with you, but you can try and be a spinner, spin things back to the positive. It's not always easy, but people's minds aren't changed just because you tell them you're wrong. So if they don't think there's value in the library, you can say, well, I disagree with that because of X, Y, and Z, and move on. Don't take that personally. People have a myriad of reasons for not agreeing with you, or they're unable to support the library, or they can't attend an event. You don't necessarily need to know. You just have to accept that at face value and know that you've done your duty. You are sharing information. You are advocating for the library. Them not being receptive or being unable to respond to you is not like indicative of you failing in any way. Last, I want to encourage you to make your advocacy about people and needs and not just about money. We all have a tendency to advocate for libraries in terms of funding because that matters a lot, right? But the library exists to serve the needs of your community. So this is, one, going to make your advocacy more personal and targeted rather than just self-serving. As a trustee, you're serving your community, and it should be one of your primary goals to help the library serve the broad needs of that community in a ton of different ways. If you have any other like advocacy do's or don'ts, or great like success stories or failure stories, I accept those too. You can feel free to share those either in the chat or unmute. I do want to say that, going off of our discussion of the recent Dr. Seuss drama, that's a really good advocacy opportunity, like Janet said, talking about it on the news or in the newspaper, to share the importance of the library's role in this, and kind of defining what censorship is and intellectual freedom, and what does a ban on a book mean. This isn't a ban, right? It's just choosing not to publish a book anymore. And then on maybe a larger level, there is currently some legislation at the federal level called the, Janet, correct me if I'm wrong, like the Build America's Library Act.
That's it.
Is that it?
Yep.
Yes. That is, please, all of you, take part in advocating for the passage of this legislation to help get funding for the states to construct, renovate, and maintain library buildings. There haven't been federal funds for library building, like renovation and construction, for over 25 years. So that's a really large advocacy opportunity that we need as many people to rally behind as absolutely possible. And then for the very last time, we have the contact information of myself, the Library Services Division Director, Carmen Redding, and State Librarian Mary Susie. If you have any questions or concerns, contact any of us, or speak out now and I'll try to talk to you. And that's all I have for you today.